Welcome to Untold Pleasure, the Cancer, Sex and Intimacy podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Cheryl.
And we will be taking you on a pleasure-focused journey where we aim to end the shame, stigma and silence around cancer, sex and intimacy. Welcome to episode 2. So today we're going to be talking about those sort of quite extreme treatments that can lead us to have a lot of complex side effects with our sexual intimacy and that side of ourselves. So things like surgery, whether that's mastectomy or other kinds of cancer surgery, medically induced menopause, and the various things that can happen when those areas of our cancer treatment aren't addressed in regards to our sexual health and how we move through the world.
We're delighted to welcome Liz O'Riordan, who is a breast cancer surgeon and also a breast cancer patient, and Lucy Walters, who is also a breast cancer patient and a wonderful member of our Cancer, Sex and Intimacy steering group.
Obviously, Cheryl, you have had surgery. So how's everything feeling right now?
6 years on, Sarah, my scar still hurts. It's really painful, especially the first sort of third of it, from just between the breasts partway down. It has formed a keloid on the top, so it's actually quite painful, and I don't know who to see or what to say about it, to whom, and how I describe it.
When you're sort of out of the flow of your main treatments, main surgeries, main whatever it might be that you're undergoing, it's sort of like, well, I'm going to have to just deal with this on my own or work out what I can do to feel more comfortable in myself physically and emotionally.
It just feels so wrong because 6 years on, I'd expect that my scar has settled down and it doesn't interfere with my sexual side or intimate side of me. But unfortunately, it does. Even the bras that I wear are impacted by this scar because it's raised and it's painful. Positions that I might choose to hold sexually are impacted by the scars. So I definitely need to find out where to be signposted to.
It's sort of like, we don't expect doctors to necessarily be like, right, what position can you try this week? But where can we be signposted to where we can just have a bit of a conversation with other people that have had similar experiences? And, today we're talking about surgery, and a lot of that might be related to the breasts, but there's so many different kinds of surgery with cancer, and scars are more than just the visual.
Absolutely.
It's how we feel, how we move through the world as well. And it must be that reminder almost, kind of, even if it's like you brush a piece of clothing or something.
Oh, definitely. Clothing sometimes hurts. Sometimes it just hurts if, say, I've had too much fluid to drink and it extends the abdomen. I can feel the pain.
And I suppose, bringing it back to that sexual side of ourselves and that part of our body, that connection, that line between the breasts and the knicker line, but also the beauty and erogenous world that the stomach is and everything, there's a lot being touched upon there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because it's things have changed. Obviously, that part of my abdomen I always admired and I love looking at it, but now not so much. Now, visually, I don't like looking at it, so I'll always cover it up.
But I know you have. I've heard the sexy story of some of the lingeries you've tried out, though. You're someone who does know how to find a good solution there.
Absolutely, they've got so many beautiful bodices out there that you can wear that can cover that sort of area. And if you don't want someone to see the scars or touch them, be in contact with them, you can always use them as a good either role play or just as a way of disguising and hiding what you don't want someone to see or feel their way around.
I guess it's because I think there's a sexiness to that. There's like an agency. It's like, you know what? My stomach's that's mine. That's my zone. I'm in control of who sees that, who touches that. But the breasts,
do what you want.
I want you to enjoy this and give me pleasure here. This is where I feel my pleasure. And I guess it's like directing people to your pleasure zones, the places that you want to be enjoyed, or even if it's just for yourself, isn't it? It's like, what can I do to highlight the parts of my body that do feel sensation that I want people to interact with?
Absolutely, Sarah. And, this is the thing, this is the key part of our cancer journey. The holistic part that is missing is fundamental, but it is absolutely missing. Because if I were a person that wasn't able to seek out the type of lingerie that can disguise surgery such as this, I would hide away from being intimate with someone, or even just looking at myself, being disgusted with myself when I shouldn't be. So it's a part of our journey where I sadly have to admit that we're being failed.
Definitely. And there is just no support. I think there's so many layers to the scars of surgery. I think it's wonderful to reclaim the scars or show them in whatever way, but it's that choice, isn't it? And not everyone wants to. Maybe it is a personal thing, but maybe there is pain associated and people might want to cover up. People might want to be like, actually, you know what? These are my scars. Let's bring them out into the open. But it's that choice, isn't it? And playing with fabrics and lingeries and doing things that we can make ourselves feel empowered and excited and ownership, I suppose, isn't it?
I absolutely agree. Liz, thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
Tell us what made you want to be a surgeon and specifically focused on breast cancer.
Oh, well, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to help people, and I was fascinated by medicine. And my dad was a surgeon and a GP, and I was just obsessed with the human body. And at sixth form, I did some work experience, and I managed to get into an operating theatre. And just being in that room, seeing a surgeon lift bowel out of someone's abdomen and show me a cancer and take it out, I thought, wow, this is just incredible. And I loved every branch of surgery I did, whether it was orthopedics or urology or vascular surgery. But a very wise man once said to me that I should pick the body fluid I mind the least. And there's no body fluids with breasts, although you do get sweaty armpit from time to time. And it's dressmaking. Every breast is different. You get to reshape and recreate and reconstruct and develop a really good relationship with my patients. But the final bonus for me was that there's no on-call, there's no out-of-hours work, there were no breast emergencies. So it meant I could finally start to have a life again and reclaim my weekends as my own.
Wow, that's really interesting. I never thought of that. Reclaiming your own time. Thank you. So if we turn now to your own diagnosis, can you tell us a bit about your own journey so far?
Yeah, so I was 40, I was fit and healthy. I had no family history of breast cancer. And like many women and men listening, I never checked my breasts. I never thought it would happen to me. And I'd had a couple of cysts, so I'd had normal mammograms in the past. And one morning I just looked in the mirror after having a shower and I saw a lump on my left breast in the cleavage. And it just looked like another cyst. But I went to get it checked out. My mammogram was normal and I had an ultrasound scan, and I turned to look at the screen because I did ultrasounds myself as a consultant breast surgeon, and I saw a cancer. And whereas most patients are drip-fed information, we have a biopsy, you get the result. You have an operation, you get the result. You have chemo, you get the result. I knew I was young. I need chemo. I need a mastectomy. I had a good idea what my chance of being alive in 10 years was. And although I thought I knew everything about breast cancer as a consultant surgeon with a PhD, I knew nothing because I'd never been a patient. And as I went through chemo and a mastectomy and reconstruction and radiotherapy and hormone blockers, it was a real eye-opener to see just exactly what my patients were going through.
Well, as the patient, you're now the patient lying on that bed.
Yeah.
Did you see a reaction from the person who was doing your scans?
Yes, I did. So I didn't get treated in my own hospital. I got treated in a hospital where I'd worked as a junior doctor where my husband works. So they knew me. Mm-hmm. And you can tell the consultant came in whilst they were preparing to do the biopsy and said, where do you want to be treated? Because I'm not sure I can. We didn't need to wait for the biopsy results. We knew. And I got to ring my mum and tell her, in 5 days' time, I'll be telling you I've got breast cancer. She said, don't be so silly. No, I will. I know.
Well, thank you for that. And how would you say that having that dual perspective changed your experience as both a patient and as a surgeon?
I think I was a terrible patient because I wanted to tell people what to do, put the scar here and use these stitches. And I did not like being out of control. I was terrible during chemo because I knew it was meant to make you feel like SHIT, but I didn't realize there was all this help available. And I sat at home suffering in silence, crying for 10 days with bleeding piles and constipation because I didn't realize I could ring for help. When I went back to work for a year before my first local recurrence, it really changed how I talk to patients because I now understood what it was like to hear those 3 words, you have cancer. And whereas in the past, I used to say, it's good we've caught it early and you're lucky it hasn't spread, because I've looked after women who've died of this disease. I now got just how devastating those words are, and to give people the time to come to terms with the diagnosis. And I found it really hard to operate because I was left with chronic pain after my mastectomy, and I was scared of causing pain to my patients. And part of me just wanted to say, yes, I know what it's like. I've been there too. But I couldn't tell them about my own experiences because I still had to be the bad guy. And that was really hard.
And where would you say you're at now in your journey? Whereabouts are you?
So I've just had a second local recurrence. My first was in 2018. And I noticed a new lump on my mastectomy scar the day before my memoir, Under the Knife, came out this summer. So I've just had surgery for that. And I'm now on cancer drugs and injections for life to stop it coming back a third time. So I'm on that kind of roller coaster of getting used to what's happened. It's all been a bit traumatic at times.
Would you say that you're very good at taking up support that's out there?
No. Before I was diagnosed as a consultant surgeon, I had no idea what support was available online. I'd never looked at a breast cancer charity website. I had no idea the questions men and women were asking on social media. And then I got breast cancer and I realized how much information and misinformation is out there. One thing that helped me was I told Twitter the day I was diagnosed, and I found an incredible group of doctors who had cancer who would really help me talk about what it was like being on both sides of the table. But there is so much information out there, and I almost wish I'd been diagnosed today when there's all this help and people just willing to give you what you need when you need it.
What would you say to someone who is going into the industry, i.e. going to train to be a breast cancer surgeon? What would you say to them now, knowing you have that hindsight?
I'd say it's the most incredible career, and there is no way you can ever get inside your patient's head, and you don't have the time to tell them everything they need to know. But it's important to realize that doing a good job isn't what I thought. It's all about a pretty scar. We need to help our patients live. And that's why it's really important to talk about how to cope with the side effects of treatment, the importance of exercise, how to get your sex life back. So we really help these women carry on living rather than just being alive.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Liz. That was a brilliant introduction there. We are now joined by Lucy Waters. So Lucy has been on the cancer, sex and intimacy journey from pretty much day one, I would say, as you were at our original workshop at Shush Women's Store.
I was indeed.
And you joined us on the steering group, and you've really helped make a lot of those fundamental decisions and contributed in so many wonderful ways. So thank you for that. Let's kick off. Can you give us an overview of your cancer journey?
Yes. So I think it was 5 years ago. I am somebody for whom the past has gone, and therefore I tend to look to the forward. So I cannot tell you my dates. I'm not somebody who can give you the dates of my various cancer things. But I think it was 5 years ago. I had a regular mammogram. I knew that there was something wrong because I had something else going on, ironically. So I had a leaky nipple. So when they did the mammogram, it was a bit oozy and a bit disgusting. But we already knew that wasn't an issue. It was just one of those things. So the nurse had said, oh, well, obviously you'll be called in because they want to look at exactly what that is. So when I got the letter saying, oh, you need to come in, there's something in your mammogram, I was like, oh, yeah, of course, it's fine. I'll go in and I'll explain what this is. It was damage rather than anything else. So I go in and I see a very nice woman, and we go through this whole process of her looking at the things and then me going, oh, yeah, well, there was some damage and that's what it is. It's a damaged milk duct and all the rest of it. And she went, well, okay, that's fine. And then she said, but what about this? And put her finger on an area of my breast that I had, in fact, noticed a couple of weeks earlier and hadn't thought anything about. And at that point, it was like, oh, okay. So my first diagnosis, it was a lump. It was small enough and they were happy it was early enough that the surgeon said, right, we're going to do a lumpectomy. You don't need to lose the breast. having gone in and seen the surgeon, I got to see a breast nurse, and she said to me, right, I'm here to do anything I can to help. Is there any questions that you've got, any concerns that you've got? And I said to her, well, I don't want chemotherapy, and what's all this I'm hearing about vaginal dryness? I don't want any of that, thank you very much. And she said to me, oh, well, don't worry about that. Tell you what, you should get your partner a shed. And I sort of said, oh, I don't think you understand. I'm not saying that I want to not have a sex life. I have a very good active sex life, thank you very much. And I want to carry on having it despite having this diagnosis. That took me back a bit because it was, sorry, your expectation of me as a woman in my 50s at that point is that sex is over. So, roll forward, lumpectomy, absolutely fine, treated with radiotherapy, put on tamoxifen, which is a fairly traditional hormone suppressant. It sent me Doulali. I came off it after about 3 months, and then by the following April, I was diagnosed with a second primary breast cancer. So the good news is I have had 2 primary breast cancers. They're not related. It's not secondary. It's not that I've got any spreading infection. I've just been really unlucky. So the second one was on the other side. Got to do the same thing. Lumpectomy, no chemotherapy, radiotherapy. But because the second one happened, I was given no choice then about what my treatment after that would be. So I was put on Zoladex injections, which are the big things that go into your abdomen once a month that stop your ovaries working. And I was on a daily hormone suppressant. And that is when the reality of what chemical menopause means really kicked in. I'd been trying to say to the oncologist that in having sex, there's pressure there where there wouldn't normally be. There's pain there where there wouldn't normally be. And it was kind of written down, but then that was it. It just got worse and worse. So I went back and I kept sort of saying, can we do something about this? Can we talk about this? What else can we do? And they got to the point of referring me to the gynecologist who's attached to oncology, which was really good of them. I mean, that was a start. And it was quite interesting. The first meeting was felt like a good one because, poor man, I was in there for half an hour. I was crying over him. It was the first time anyone was listening to me when I was trying to explain what was wrong and how I was feeling. And unfortunately for him, the one thing I didn't have was hot flushes. And poor love, all he could really diagnose me for and try and prescribe to me for was something that might help hot flushes. He did have a very good conversation with me about lubricants and about moisturisers. He did do his best. But I sort of came away with a bit of a, okay, so I will do everything I can. I will follow the rules. I will make sure I'm using the moisturisers. I will make sure I'm using the lubricants. Actually, for me, I didn't get to the point of needing the full set of dilators, but I did find that a comfortably sized glass dildo being used at the same time was incredibly beneficial because that for me acted as enough of as a dilator to make things more comfortable. So we were able to progress on that one. So, that's sort of my cancer journey turning straight into, and the problems I've had with sex.
Well, that's what we're here to discuss, This is the Cancer, Sex and Intimacy podcast. And I think, and that's an interesting tip, the glass dildo, because there's temperature play as well, isn't there? The cold, hot, however
cold,
you want
hot.
it.
And I mean, maybe I was lucky that because I feel like I might have caught it early enough and was starting to do things to try and help it. Basically, if we planned it and used a lot of lubrication and I was using the moisturiser and we went through a phase of me making sure I was using the glass dildo as part of foreplay, we could get to a point where penetrative sex was possible and pleasurable. But I had to find my own path there and I also have an incredibly patient partner who was prepared to do the experimentation with me and, see what would work. So, yeah.
But I think it's bringing it back to that quite terrifying line that you were given by the nurse or whoever it was spoken to, that, get your partner a shed. That just says so much about how women's sexuality is viewed, that your pleasure doesn't matter, but your partner's pleasure, that's what matters. Well, get them a shed. So even when you did ask the question, you were sort of shut down.
Yeah.
And to have to keep advocating for yourself is a lot.
And by the second cancer, the hospital I was being treated at, reduction of funds and all the rest of it meant that actually I didn't have a breast nurse. There was no one to talk to about that sort of thing anyway. It happened a year apart. So even in the year, any facilities that might have been there had already fallen away. So it was down to me having the conversation with the oncologist, trying to push that. And then just keeping going really, and just questioning and asking and trying to get them to talk to me about it.
And how are you now, and what does the near future look like for you?
I am still struggling with some of the more obvious menopause symptoms. I think that, as well as anecdotal and personal, I think there's a reasonable amount of evidence that chemical menopause, no matter what, is harder than the regular. I think it's a combination of the length of time that you get to adjust if you're going to go through menopause normally. It can be anything between sort of 2 and 10 years. Perimenopause can last up to 10 years. I think I was just starting that. I was quite late in that process. So I wasn't really suffering with a lot of those things. So to suddenly have that switch off overnight meant that, I am still struggling with I think the depression and the mind fog and the words, the gaps in your words, the vocabulary that falls away. You're trying very hard to have a very good conversation and suddenly the word for something is completely gone. That sort of stuff in particular, that's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, there's so many layers to menopause, aren't there?
Yeah.
And I know we're really focusing on the sex and intimacy right now, but there's so much that can go into shifting how you feel about yourself and your identity.
Yes.
But it's that rediscovery and that experimentation and finding new routes to pleasure.
Yes, I wasn't going to take it lying down. As somebody for whom sex itself, but also being very female, it'd been a massive part of my identity all my life. It's one of the reasons I didn't want to have chemotherapy. I didn't want to lose my hair. So I got away with that. I didn't have to have chemo. I didn't lose my hair. But it turns out you still have to have menopause symptoms, which is a bit rubbish.
It's one of those things, isn't it? You're always told what side effects are, like hair loss and things, but no one really explains what menopause actually means in terms of side effects.
No, and I think it's a worry that it's something that is still not really very clearly understood. And also, of course, not everyone has a bad one. So again, it becomes, well, are you sure? Is that really what you're suffering from? Is that really an issue? But that's natural. All women go through it.
Well, thank you, Lucy. Thank you for your introduction. So we are going to come together as a group now and talk about the effects of medical menopause and also body-altering surgery. So coming first to you, Liz, how is it that hormone blockers and being sort of thrown into menopause, what kind of effect does that have on the body and the relationship someone can have to their sex and sexuality?
Before I had cancer, I'd have told women that they might have a few hot flushes and a bit of vaginal dryness, and that's it. But chemo throws everyone into an instant menopause. And if you're on hormone blockers, it happens over a couple of weeks compared to 3 or 4 years for normal women. And I had no idea just how bad the impact would be on my relationship with my husband, because your estrogen levels drop, your libido drops, your vagina becomes dry and painful, and sex is often the last thing on your mind. And nobody talks about it. I never talked about it with patients. I never heard any of my bosses talk about it. And it was only finding women online like Sam Talk Sex who said there's help available that I realized there is so much work to do to help men and women after a cancer diagnosis get their sex lives back.
And I think that's so much about what we're about with the Cancer, Sex and Intimacy podcast, like ending the silence and just allowing people to feel less alone, because as you say, Liz, there really are a lot of things that can be done. Lucy, coming to you, could you tell us a little bit about your experience of navigating those really difficult side effects? And I know we've spoken about your journey with cancer, your personal journey, but let's touch upon that a little bit more.
I think for me, it's been interesting having this happen at this time. We are in a space where there is more conversation going on around menopause than there ever has been before, for which I assume a lot of women are very grateful, because at least it is something which there is a discussion being had out there. But it reinforced for me that as a woman who has grown up through various iterations of information and what's out there, I had no idea what the menopause really looked like. And for me, it's been a massive, my library of books now where, you just go out and find all the ones that reference estrogen or my dry vagina or things like that to try and find something to add to the routines of, of good eating, exercise, trying to be healthy, to actually make a direct impact on what's going on with the menopause symptoms.
So I suppose surgery and the effect that can have on the body and how intrinsically linked that is to how you feel as a sexual being. Coming to you first, Liz, I know you mentioned that you had surgery, and how did you kind of reclaim that relationship with your body?
I don't think I ever have fully. So I had a mastectomy and I had the joy of 5 months of chemo to decide whether I wanted a reconstruction. And you don't think about what your breasts mean to you until you're faced with losing one. And I had to think, how does it affect my sexuality, how I flirt, my femininity? I had a lump I could feel for 5 months during chemo. So it was there staring me in the face. And I decided to have a reconstruction, partly for vanity, because I like wearing low neck V dresses and I didn't want to wear turtlenecks all the while. But when I'd had it, looking in the mirror and seeing your chest is very, very different. You can never physically prepare for it. I realized it's not a breast reconstruction. It is a lump of silicone or fat and muscle put underneath skin that is numb. It has no feeling, no sexual erogenous zones. It's just purely there to stop you having to wear a prosthesis. And when I had to go flat after my recurrence in 2018, I spent months crying, walking around supermarkets and clothing shops thinking, how on earth am I going to disguise this? Because I don't wear a prosthesis. And it took months before I could let my husband look at me naked. And I would still only look at myself from the neck up in the mirror. And it takes a long time to stop grieving for what you've lost and learn to accept this is your body now and you cannot change your scars, and learn to love them.
I think that's such an important point, isn't it? It's like allowing yourself to have that grief. Because I think if we don't allow ourselves that space, then how can we learn to own then the body that we're in? And it's so much more about other people, isn't it? It's about the self, like feeling sexy within oneself. And that takes time.
I think for me, I couldn't flirt because I'd lost my hair. I used to have long hair, but that was how I flirted. And then suddenly I don't have hair. I don't have eyelashes. I don't have a breast. I don't have any sex hormones. I didn't feel like a woman. And I didn't want to dress up and wear my heels and my sexy clothes because they looked all wrong. And it was really hard to try and find a way of being that woman again.
Yeah, it's such a journey. It always reminds me also of like one thing that I know a friend of mine said is that people make ridiculous comments as well. It's sort of like, oh, it's free boob job or something. But I think it's like until people have any idea of what it truly involves, these jokes people make to try and make things more palatable that really are ridiculous. So Lucy, just coming back to yourself, because I know you've spoken a lot about parts of yourself that are so kind of key to your identity. So how did that feel when you were first diagnosed, and how you kept those elements of yourself?
My look, my breasts, my hair, my femininity, my being very aggressively female was absolutely key to my identity. And therefore, getting the first diagnosis, the night before the operation, I made my chap take a picture of my breasts in my prettiest bra as a sort of, this is it. They're not going to look like this again. So let's at least memorialise them. I got lucky in the sense, I think it's lucky in the sense that whilst I've had 2 primary cancers, one in each breast, they were lumps and they were dealt with as lumps. They just took the lumps out and then treated from there. So the smaller one got smaller. I was trying to point out to the surgeon when he was working with the other one, can you at least try and even them up a bit? I mean, it was half joke, half take me seriously as a woman who has breasts and is wanting to try and keep as much as possible. The bra shopping post-operation is just so depressing. I still want to be able to look like I've got a nice bra on. Why do they have to be all these nasty, beige, thick, elastic? So I realised that because I'd been left enough of the breast that I can still get cleavage. I now wear a particular style of bra so that they're all up and centre, which is really important to me. And on one level, it sounds like such a small thing. You know, I've dealt with 2 cancers, but actually, this is what's left of me. This is what people still see, and I want them to see this. This is part of who I am. It's part of what makes it hard. It is attacking the bits that are you. And then the menopause symptoms generally, the whole issue around vaginas and dryness and pain and all the things that used to work so easily, they were so good. Suddenly all that had gone away. That's awful.
So how did your medical team, how were they? Did they ask you?
I wasn't ever asked directly. I would try and bring things up. With the first diagnosis, I'd been quite flip and quite sort of jolly about the whole thing, and we'll get through this, it'll be fine. I'll have the least symptoms, it'll be great, Delusional is one of the words for it, obviously, but, it was the way of getting through it the first time. The second time, it was just, okay, I can't do anything other than do what you tell me. So the Zoladex injections and hormone suppressants and all of that stuff that then kicked the symptoms that had been starting into overdrive. And I made enough noise that, as I say, I did get referred to the gynecologist attached to oncology. And he did his best. But all he had to offer really was try a moisturising lubricant rather than a regular lubricant, and here are some antidepressants. Because some of these antidepressants might have a side effect of helping with a hot flush, which I didn't have. And I chose not to go down that route because if you looked at all the other side effects of the various things he was suggesting, all of them had suppressed libido and, depression. And it's like, well, no, that's not what I need help with. I don't know if anything would have been different if the doctors had been in a position to be able to have a conversation with me either earlier on, have a more full conversation about what was going to happen so that I had some warning, didn't feel quite so alone in dealing with my symptoms and just sort of trying to get on with it rather than just being, as I say, I can't say I wasn't helped, but it didn't help.
You still had to ask, though, didn't you?
I still had to ask, absolutely, yeah.
So Liz, going back to when you had your mastectomy, how did you prepare for the surgery that was to come that you knew as a breast surgeon?
I don't think there's anything you can do to prepare yourself for it. You just have to realise that when you wake up, you're going to feel very, very different. And it was hard for me because I was being operated on by people I'd worked with. They were all crying when I went into the room. It was really, really hard. And I just remember coming back to the ward, looking down at my chest, seeing the implant and drains, thinking, I'm not ready to look. And it took me a couple of days before I was ready to look in the mirror and see what it was like. And nothing can prepare you for it. And I think it's realizing that that's okay. You're going to feel whatever you feel, and that's right for you. And you will get used to what you see in time.
Okay. So along the journey, have you ever thought of or used any form of psychotherapy to assist you?
Yes. So I had psychotherapy when my cancer came back the first time, and I was very lucky. My Macmillan unit had free psychotherapy counselling for anybody who needed it. If you've got a local Maggie centre or a cancer centre or like the Future Dreams in London, they also offer free counselling. And I think it's a brilliant resource. For me, it was being able to talk to someone and tell them what was going on inside my head and not worry about how they felt when I left the room. I don't need to worry about how they're going to pick themselves up when I dump my shit on them.
Yeah.
But when it comes to talking about sex, actually, it was other cancer patients who told me, have you heard that you should use lubricant? Have you heard about vaginal dilators? And actually, it was talking to other women who helped me cope with managing the side effects of the menopause. Most English people aren't very good at talking about sex. And I speak as a white person who grew up where you don't talk about sex. If there's a program of sex on the telly and your parents in the room, you look the other way. We don't talk about sex. We find it hard enough to talk about sex with our partners, let alone our GPs or the person who's operated on us when I've sat in a waiting room for half an hour desperate to see them. We don't get training as doctors to talk about sex. There's just huge gap in the market. And that's why women are getting their information from podcasts and books and other support networks about the wealth of information out there and the things that can help.
Okay. Would you say that should be a fundamental part of the training going into that industry?
I think some member of the breast care team needs to tell everyone having hormone blockers and going into a menopause that they will affect their sex life, and there is help available if and when they're ready to talk about it. It may be the breast care nurse, it may be the GP, but someone needs to make sure that at some point that information is getting through, because it's not enough to say goodbye, good luck. We need to say everyone should use lube. Yes, and Sutil that doesn't have chemicals as standard. Vagifem is safe. Dilators can help stretch the vaginal wall. You may need a different vibrator because you need a stronger sensation. There are things called O-nuts that can reduce the depth of penetration. Here's a toolkit. We are here to help you when you need it.
But it's not universally happening, is it?
No, I never talked about sex with my patients. I didn't have the time. They may not have wanted me to. When I went back after a year and I saw women at the end of the year for their first review, I would often ask, how's sex? And some of them would kind of say, oh, thank God for asking. It's really tough. And I could then share it with them because I knew what they were going through. But it's a really hard conversation to have with a stranger, and not everybody wants it. And so it's how we make sure people get that information when they're ready to have it.
Definitely. And Lucy, for you, sort of hearing maybe sort of some of the advice and toolkits you could have been offered on day one almost, or that early on, how does that make you feel as someone that really had to fight for that support?
Yes, frustrated and disappointed. I don't know whether it was the path that my particular cancers took or the way that the treatment I had went. I didn't really have a lot of support at all. There wasn't a breast care nurse. There wasn't access to... although the one thing I will say, that the hospital I was treated at, I think it only happened once, but they were able to organise so now you've had cancer. I think there were 12 of us, 14 of us. We met once a Thursday for about 6 weeks, and they tried to cover a topic each time. And one of the topics was definitely relationships and intimacy, but I don't remember much useful coming out of that. But what was absolutely key out of all of those discussions was talking to other people who'd had cancer. It wasn't the experts coming in to give us some ideas about what we might or might not do. And I've run a marathon, so you can. It was talking to someone else who go, oh my God, the burns that I had. My breast went hard from the radiotherapy. Having someone else be able to talk about things and just discuss things because they'd had it as well. That was the most useful thing about the whole episode. So I think it feels like there's two things. There's definitely encouraging medical professionals to help us think about other things, other aspects, other ways we can be helped, but also contacting with other patients because we can support each other. We can just be an ear that means it's me too. It's not, oh, that sounds awful. I can't imagine how I'd cope. It's, oh my God, yeah, when it happened to me, I had to do this. It makes such a difference. It means you're not isolated.
Yeah, I think coming together as a group, having these discussions and learning that you're just not alone within it. And it always shocks me when questions aren't being asked around breast cancer because it's just so fundamental, the hormones, the body parts affected. So I suppose key tips for something like vaginal dryness. I mean, I know it's very much about the holistic side, the psychosexual side, but there are things that can help. Obviously, Liz, you have mentioned Sutil, a wonderful lube that I have at home.
It's really nice.
Yes, Organics is another good one as well, isn't
that's
it?
That's brilliant, yes. And it comes as oil and water-based for vaginal and anal use, so it's condom-friendly, because you have to use contraception if you're on these drugs as well.
It's available on prescription as well, isn't it?
Also with Yes, at the very least, if you can't get it on prescription, if you get into the routine with them, they have offers. You buy your 3 months worth and you get your 25% off.
Get it in bulk.
Yeah, get it in bulk, You have to own it, don't you? I think that's part of it, is you just have to go in it.
It's ownership is so important. It can be hard, but I think with that peer support and those conversations, you can get to that point of owning the place that you're at.
You can. But I think there's a new paper that's come out that says to improve vaginal dryness, there are 4 things that we all need to tackle. The first is to eliminate irritants. So stop using vaginal washes, douches, lubricants that have got chemicals in, soaps. You don't need them. The vagina naturally looks after itself. The second is to moisturize, and that can be done with Vagifem, very, very low vaginal estrogen, which is safe. But sadly, so many doctors are still reluctant to prescribe it. And then lubrication, and then addressing the pelvic floor. And that could be using things like small dilators where you can gradually stretch the vaginal muscle up. Using vibrators, you can still orgasm, and often remembering what it feels like to have an orgasm can help you get in the mood. The thing for me and many women was, rather than wanting my husband to divorce me and go and find a woman with 2 breasts and a libido worked, realize I might just need to put it in the diary. because I'm never going to feel the urge. You have no sex hormones. Explaining to your partner that you may never want to have sex again, but once you get going, you may get in the mood and it may get easier and it may become less painful. And it's hard to flip your idea of sex that way.
And I think we talk a lot about redefining sort of sex and intimacy and allowing it to be this spectrum of experiences and going at a pace and reacquainting yourself with your body.
Exactly. It's not all about penetration, is it?
No.
Yeah, that's it at the end of the day. And Lucy, do you have any sort of top tips to getting intimate, either if it's with yourself or with a partner?
I think remembering masturbation is incredibly important. I think that as a path into rediscovering that bits of you do still work, or even if the bits of you don't work, you can make improvements by taking regular time to look after yourself and help yourself on that journey. All sides in relationships need patience and communication with the other party or parties, so that it's clear that it's not personal. This is the impact of what's happened when there's been a dip in hormones. For me, there's definitely, some of it's the corny stuff. It's remembering that you can just hang out and spend time with each other that isn't focused on, and the end result of this is we're going to have sex. Actually, we're hanging out to hang out and to be with each other and have a conversation, have a meal, just sit and watch some telly. Hopefully one's doing that anyway, but doing it in a way that means you're close with the other person so that there is still contact. It's a path that everyone has to find their own way through, I think. But the more that we're given the opportunity to talk about it and understand that there isn't any such thing as normal, it's not what normal looks like, it's what is good for you, what is going to make the most difference and impact on you and your relationships.
I suppose it's like that permission, isn't it? Because when anyone has a cancer diagnosis, the feeling of, oh my God, well, am I going to live? Or, what's my treatment going to be like here? So I suppose it's like giving yourself the permission to feel that you're entitled to pleasure.
Yeah.
And that must be big.
Yes, I think there's a lot in that. I would always worry that there's a feeling that, well, you're alive, isn't that great? Isn't that enough? And for me, definitely, the rest of my life, it cannot just be that I've survived cancer, whoopee. I have to have back me. I kept being told, oh, well, no, the whole point is you're a different person now. Well, yes, I understand I'm a different person, but I'm not that different. I don't want to be that different. I don't believe that. I believe that I'm still here and all the things that mattered to me before still matter now. So I'm going to find my way through this and do what I can to be similar to the person I was, perhaps, minus a few lumps. I do occasionally struggle with that. I hear so many cases, so many people who have had such bad cancers and such bad treatment. And for some of them, you can understand why life is enough. But then I didn't have that experience. I haven't been turned into a marathon running goddess because I've had breast cancer. I'm just a miserable old bat who wants to carry on having a good sex life and enjoying getting my tits out and flirting with the boys, And I don't really see that cancer should stop me doing that.
No, not at all.
It shouldn't, because at the end of the day, the stats are saying 1 in 2 of us will end up with cancer, and more than likely we'll learn to live with it as a chronic illness as opposed to dying from it. So quality of life matters. So Liz, in terms of looking at quality of life, would you say, have you taken a step back and revisited how you would like your life to look? Tell us what you've done in terms of quality of life.
Before cancer, I was the world's most boring dinner party guest because my life for the last 20 years had been eat, sleep, work, revise, repeat. I had no hobbies. My life was purely about surgery. And then I had cancer twice and I lost my career. And it was a real time to evaluate what was really important to me. And part of that was helping people and small animals and birds. But it was kind of reconnecting with nature. And I realized I am a happier, stronger, more fulfilled person now. And I'm lucky that I can afford not to work and we can live off my husband's salary because I lost my income. But it's that, yes, handbags and shoes are nice, but it's spending time with people and just doing little things like getting out, swimming in wild rivers or knitting, whatever it is, just finding time for me. And my quality of life is much better because I'm a more well-rounded person. And I actually value my body more because it's been through some really tough times and I'm still here and I'm still strong. And it's made me want to look after myself far better than I ever did as a busy doctor.
Wow,
I think
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's such an amazing point to say what this body has been through. Like, that's incredibly sexy as well, I think, to be in a body that has endured so much.
One of the best things I did, my husband got me a photo shoot during my last session of chemo. And I initially said, no, I don't want any reminders of me looking bald. But it actually was really, really freeing. The emotion came out. And I've since gone back and done a couple of topless photo shoots. And my body language and the gaze coming out of my eyes has changed. And whereas in the beginning, I was kind of cowering and afraid and fearful for the future. Now I'm like, F off. This is what I look like. These are my scars. Yes, I've got one breast. What are you looking at? And time is a great healer to say, this is me and I can do anything.
Excellent. So you basically have owned everything that's happened to you.
Yeah, you have no choice. At some point, it'll just click. I can't change what's happened in the past, but I can change what happens in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz.
Liz, so you mentioned your husband and that relationship. So could you tell us a little bit more about the partner side? Because I guess the partners are often neglected within that conversation.
Yeah, sure. And again, I'm speaking as someone who is lucky enough to be married and have a very loving husband. I can't imagine how bad it is if you are single or trying to date. But I think when you've got breast cancer, the world revolves around you. And often the people looking after you and you love can feel left out. And I know I've had lots of women come and talk to me about how hard it is for their partners. When the first time they tried to have sex and it was painful, some women have said it felt like marital rape because they weren't expecting it to be so sore and didn't know what to do. And what do you do in that situation? My husband and I, during chemotherapy, we had a cuddle in bed and it was like, well, do I put my hands on your breast, but then I can feed the cancer? Do I want to feel the cancer when I'm trying to be intimate? We don't talk about it. So I think having discussions with them before you get to the bedroom, just to explain how you're feeling, safe words you can say if you need to stop. It's not because you don't like them anymore. It's just because things are a bit different. But I think some partners do need help as well. And I know a lot of women who've said their husbands needed a drug like Viagra just to help them maintain an erection because they were so scared of hurting their partner. And it's remembering there are 2 or 3 or 4 of you in that relationship and everyone may need help to get it back on track. And I think that's why we all need to be better at just talking about this openly and honestly and saying, this is what it is like from now on. Let's try this. If it doesn't work, we'll do that. And realizing it's not all about you. It's about the other people in the relationship as well.
Yeah, what's the saying? Communication is lubrication.
Yes.
It's like you can buy lube, but you can also talk, which can help.
It makes such a difference. They finally understand. It's not that I don't fancy you. It's just that I don't get wet. I watch Fleabag, The Hot Priest, nothing, dry as a bone. My body doesn't work anymore. You know, it's like, oh my God. You just have to laugh and joke and try and see the funny side of it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why we always wanted to call this project Cancer, Sex and Intimacy, because it's the intimacy side that's where there can be a lot of fun and experimentation. For you, Lucy, I know you've talked a lot about exploration and pleasure. And is there a new route to pleasure that you found on your journey?
As somebody who had quite an arsenal of equipment gathered over the years, sometimes it's a reminder that it's worth going back and exploring some of that stuff. We've got so many toys that for the longest time through treatment and then through the post-treatment scenario, it kind of just fell away. They didn't really think about that sort of stuff. But actually, being tied up, getting a bit of equipment out,
well, hey.
getting an interesting costume on, because I have history with it. Then you can make it about bringing back memories and bring about, remember when we did this and how about that? I wonder if that still works. I wonder if this will work now. Let's try that on you and see how it goes. There's so many layers to how important sex is in a relationship and sex in all its guises. So it's not just the occasional shag. It is that the intimacy and the connection you have with someone because you have history, because you've tried these things out. Communicating about sex and relationships is something we all need to get better at. And God forbid, as you say, I mean, if 1 in 2 of us are going to get cancer, then we're all going to have this conversation at some point, either as the person who has it or as the recipient. So, yeah.
I think, I mean, such a good point. If people had been having these conversations within their relationships and even with medical teams, depending on just kind of other gynae issues maybe or sexual health issues, then it would make life so much easier post a cancer diagnosis. I think it also comes back to language as well, doesn't it? Like a lot of people don't know how to refer to their genitalia almost, like vagina, vulva. These words are not used in medical spheres unless it's sort of something very specific. But I have vaginal dryness, or my vulva has lost sensation. Yeah, when people sort of say down there, or medical professionals say down there, it's
or
like
my new.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. But it's the same with breasts. We get, check your tatters, check your chebs, check your pillows. If we can't call breasts when we're talking about breast cancer awareness, there is something wrong.
Yeah.
But then, being fair, social media won't let us use the correct language.
I
so
know.
it's very, very difficult.
Having to put stars in all the letters, like, where am I going to put the stars now? Run out of stars. Passing the dildo. Passing the dildo. Passing the dildo.
Give us the ear.
So the question is, how do you create intimacy that is in a non-sexual way? And this can be solo or partnered. Cheryl, do you want to start?
So this is the dildo. So basically, in this section, I would say that the way I'm intimate with myself without being sexual is to enjoy a pedicure, and I do it myself.
Mm.
I scrub my own feet. I soak them in warm water, scented water. I stroke my own ankles, my own toes. I towel dry them precisely. I cream them slowly. And then I paint them and patiently sit there and watch them dry. That is me being intimate, because I said, if you're lucky and you meet me, you'll be able to see my toes, how pretty they are. But if you're not, I'll enjoy them myself. I'll pass the dildo on.
It is interesting, as somebody who is far too directly sexually orientated, taking the step back to think about intimacy rather than sex is quite a challenge. And as I'm
it's a nice dildo.
As I'm frantically
squeezing
the dildo. Lucy is passing the dildo between hands. It's gold, it's sparkly, given to us by the wonderful Renee.
Oh dear. Yes, you don't want a visual of this. You really don't. I think that for me, intimacy, and the with myself bit is quite a good point. It is body self-care. It is making sure that I'm using fabulous creams and lotions on my face and on my body. It's making sure that I am looking after all the bits of my skin and my body, whether they're on display or not, so that I know I feel the best I can feel. I regularly wear really good underwear. I try to make sure that I've got a bra that I'll always be happy for someone to see if I have an accident. So I think it's taking care of myself in that way, in a way that is feminine enough that I feel like I'm still myself. But there's always the element of fun in me as well, which is why I'm groping this thing like some depraved animal.
And Liz, I'm going to metaphorically pass the dildo.
I have a large yellow water bottle, baby Alex, so I can hold that.
That is quite something.
I think for me, my real treat is to go to a hairdresser's, because I couldn't go for a long time during chemo when I lost my hair. And just to get a head wash and that head massage, that really, really good shiatsu head massage. I swear there've been times I've nearly come in the chair. That for me, that's just letting someone take care of me, and they're just doing it because they've got the time. Yeah, that's it.
Love that.
Gorgeous. Love that so much. Go on, I'll answer as well. I will go for the solo response as well, which is I really like Googling underwear. Like I fantasize and I look at the most expensive underwear that I could never afford. And I'm just like, oh, wow, I'd look hot in that. I really want to buy a latex bra. So I'm saving up for that. And, I don't care who will see it. Hopefully someday someone will see it. But just to own this beautiful item that I can wear out or under clothing or just try on at home and have fun with. Yeah, that's how I create intimacy for myself. Well, what a discussion. And I mean, that head massage, I'm going to have to go to the hairdressers that Liz goes to.
Yes. Oh, yes. That was some massage, wasn't it?
Oh, it must have been. But yeah, brilliant to touch upon all those important topics around medical menopause and the way that these very extreme sort of cancer surgeries can affect your routes to pleasure and intimacy. So a wonderful discussion.
Absolutely. But do you know what? I'm really looking forward to the next episode. I mean, I've looked forward to all of them. But this one, if you don't know already, I'm a Black woman. And talking about sex and intimacy in the community is a big taboo. No, no, no. But next week, we're going to say yes, yes, yes.
Oh, I can't wait. Amazing. Well, until next time, I hope you join us and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. See you soon.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week. You've been listening to Untold Pleasure,
the Cancer, Sex and Intimacy podcast. Please like, rate and review this podcast because that is the best way that we can get this far and wide to the cancer community.
Please also follow us on Instagram at sex_cancer_intimacy or drop us an email on cancerandintimacy@gmail.com.
And keep passing that dildo.